Alright, so welcome to part 3 of the college saga. If you haven't seen the first two parts, you should probably watch them. So, last time I teased about how I had a really crummy second roommate. Let's talk about all three of my roommates, shall we? Now, as you know, I'm an only child. Well, you probably don't even know that. I'm an only child. So, and I'm an antisocial person. I'm an introvert. I like spending a lot of time by myself. I like my personal space. When I do things like watch YouTube videos and watch TV, I like to do that alone. Yeah, I mean, with friends sometimes, but a lot of the time I like to do that stuff alone. That's just who I am. And I don't like being alone all the time, but, at the end of the day, I need a few hours of personal space. And yeah, but I'm also a light sleeper. I get distracted very easily, and, I like to focus. I don't like being interrupted when I'm, in the middle of editing something. So with all that in mind, let's talk about my first roommate. Let's see, what shall we call him? Let's not call him by his real name. Let's call him Billy. Yeah, let's call him Billy. So Billy, I get there the first day, and he's my first roommate, and he seemed like a nice kid. He's very much a bro. He plays video games, which is cool, but he plays shooters. I play shooters, but he plays exclusively shooters and sports game. He's that kind of gamer, if you know what I'm talking about. He rides his bike, he rides his skateboard. He's there was very clearly from the first day a big difference in our personalities. And, here's the thing. The first or second night we were there, it was, oh, hey, I'm gonna go ride my bike around the city. It wasn't like, hey, you want to go explore the city? You want to go to lunch? You want to do something together? It was, I'm gonna go do something. And when you first get to college, your roommate is the first person who you connect with. You don't have to be friends, but you expect that there's going to be at least some kind of light friendship with them. I don't know. So right off the bat, there was clearly a very difference in personalities. But that's all right. Again, you don't have to be best friends with your roommate. Well, as time goes on, and this deals a bit with my my friends, my group of friends at that school that I had and lost, and I guess now would be a time to talk about them. It goes along with the roommate thing. But anyway, there would be things that Billy would do. He would leave the door open. Whether I'm in the room or not, he wouldn't shut the door. And this became problematic when there are kids that will burst into a room and, just walk into a room and be like, hey guys, party time, strangers. And so you could very easily steal something like that. You could walk into a room if there's no one in there, and the door's unlocked. The door's open, not just unlocked, open. A person could walk in the room. If there's people in there, be like, hey, I heard noises, let's party. If there's not people in there, you could take something and leave. I got my iPad, I've got my MacBook, I've got my camera, and I can't lock all of the stuff up. I have a lot of expensive equipment, and not all of it can be locked up. So, locking the door, or even just closing the door. But Billy wouldn't do it. Billy left the door open all the time. All the freaking time. My first room was next to the lounge, which was loud. And it's so I'd be in there watching something, with my headphones on. This is a big thing. I had my headphones on all the time to block out other people, and also to try and be considerate, right? To keep the noise, so they don't have to, my roommate doesn't have to hear my YouTube video playing. To try and be considerate. I'm trying to block out noise and stuff, and here he is leaving the door open. So every time he would burst in the room and then leave, I'd have to gut up and shut the door, because it would be really loud if I didn't. So there's little things like that. And it's a security issue, too. He'd leave the door just open when I would, I'd be about to go to sleep. So I'd either have to get up and shut the door or risk, I don't think the idea of the door being open and unlocked while I'm sleeping is not a very nice thought, really. There'd be other things, like the fact that he liked to sleep with the window open. And if you know anything about New York City, there's always construction. So I would routinely wake up to jackhammering. And this is personal differences. This is not him trying to be malicious to me. This is, he sleeps with the window open, I need silence to sleep. And he's a heavy sleeper. You know, personal differences, whatever. He's not an awful person, but he is a terribly irresponsible person. For instance, the refrigerator, we were going to get a refrigerator. He said he'd handle it. He, like 3 weeks into school, and he was like, I don't know, man, the guy wouldn't get back. You know, I called my mom and I asked her to do it. She did it immediately. Billy never paid me his half of the $200, and he used the refrigerator. I asked him twice. He was like, oh yeah, no, next time I go home I'll get the payment. He never paid me. And I'm sure he would have if I had kept bugging him, but at that point I knew I was going to transfer to a different room, so I was just like, you know what, I'm not even going to deal with the money, you know, because it'd be awkward to have him pay me and then I'd pay him back half or something. You know, so I mean, those are a few examples of how he's irresponsible. There was one time I came back to the room, the door was open, again, unlocked and open. He was nowhere in sight, I wasn't in the room. There was a wad of bills on his bed, just a wad of bills. And when I got in the room, he came back about 15 minutes later. In that 15 minutes, someone could have stolen that wad of bills. So I talked to my parents. My parents were like, you should have taken it, and then later on been like, oh, I thought that was for the refrigerator. I was honestly tempted to, like, take one of his things and hide it, and just be like, I don't know, man, you know, you left the door open, stuff could happen. You know, I wouldn't take his things, but I'd just, you know, move it. I didn't. But, so there was obviously a lot of this, and me, I wanted to be a good roommate. I've never had a roommate. I wanted to be a good roommate and a good person. So I would just kind of let a lot of these things go. I let it go as personal differences. You know, he wasn't trying to be mean. And I could, you know what, I could get up and shut the door every time. I could deal with being woken up early sometimes. Like, I was trying to be a good guy. And I'm also very bad about confrontations and dealing with people like that. So I had a hard time going to him and telling him there was a problem. So it's partially my fault. I didn't go and say, listen, can we shut the window? I told him about the door. I told him about the refrigerator. But I wasn't like, you know, I can't sleep because the window's open. Like, I didn't, you know. And so that is partially my fault. But the biggest problem that I had with him was the fact that he would constantly invite a ton of people into the room. Dorm rooms are incredibly small. This was a very basic, very small dorm room. If one person was up and walking around the room, the other person really couldn't be, without us having to, like, brush past each other. There wasn't that much room between the beds. So when he would invite people over to the room, there would be people all over the room. I couldn't get in. Basically what ended up happening was every weekend I went home, came here, you know, the 2-hour train ride, because I didn't want to deal with being there when he had all those people in the room. And he would play loud video games. I'd be trying to study, I'd be trying to sleep, and he just had 7 kids, you know, 6 or 7 kids in the room, loudly playing video games. And again, I didn't specifically ask him to turn it off up until one incident later, but even still, come on, there's basic human decency. If I've got my eyes closed, I'm in bed, like, you could tell I'm trying to go to sleep. Wouldn't it be nice to shut off the video games? Wouldn't it be nice to go to someone else's room? No. My room was the party room. And Billy didn't really... He was either very much in his own world, or he was very aware of my problems and just didn't care. And this became an issue because some of his friends... No, all of his friends used to be my friends. I became friends with these people because they were the only kids who didn't do drugs. And basically... At a certain point, I kind of wanted a little bit of space from them. Because again, I'm a private person. I like my space sometimes. Well, when I decided I wanted a little bit more space is when they became friends with my roommate. So even though I didn't invite them over, they were always constantly in my room and in my face and in my space. And the ones that were constantly bothering me. You know, when I was trying to write an essay and there was Halo gunfire right in back of me because the television was right in back of me. When Billy plugged his speakers in, because he had to have specific subwoofer speakers that he brought to plug into the TV because apparently the TV speakers weren't loud enough or obnoxious enough for him. So not only that, but it was, and I told them because they were my friends. I told them that, you know, they were being loud. They were in my room a lot of the time. And it would become a routine that every Sunday night when I got back to school from home, there would be a ton of kids in my room playing video games. and I couldn't unpack my stuff because I couldn't move around my room. There was, let's see, 2 kids sitting in chairs. One of them my desk chair, by the way, which I didn't, my desk chair, they didn't offer me my desk chair back when I got back in the room. They're just sitting in my desk chair. If I'm not there, it's whatever. But when I get back, I expect them to offer my chair back to me. I shouldn't have to ask for it, right? So there's 2 kids sitting in the chairs. There's 3 kids on the floor, 2 kids on Billy's bed, and sometimes kids on my bed. I specifically told him, Billy, and my friends, I didn't like that. Because they would eat and leave crumbs in my bed. And I don't want people in my bed. I don't want strangers sitting on my bed. Like, that's not a bad thing, is it really? I mean, that's my personal space. Right? So, every night I would get back to that crap, man, and it just sucked. And I mean, and they would leave garbage on my side of the room. They would leave chicken, trays of chicken on my desk. Cans of soda on my desk. They would throw stuff in my garbage, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you realize that we each get a garbage can when you go to the school, and Billy even brought one of his garbage cans. So we had 2 garbage cans that were constantly full because he was too lazy to take it out. So the kids would always dump stuff in my garbage that I had to keep taking out, especially because we had a mice problem around the school. So if there was any food garbage, it shouldn't be thrown away in personal garbage cans. It should go right in the chute. I had to keep throwing away their garbage. I had to put a sign above the garbage can, do not throw your garbage in my can, because I was so fed up with that, just taking advantage of me. That's what him and my ex-friends, I eventually had to start ignoring them because they would constantly be, in my face all the time, and the only way I could function was pretending I didn't know them, and that's not the best way to handle the situation, but I was fed up. It all culminated. Well, let me just say one more thing. A lot of the kids around the school are very inconsiderate. That is a huge problem. I try to be as considerate as I possibly can. These kids aren't. They come back drunk and singing at 3 o'clock in the morning. That, I have to hear because the lounge, which is supposed to close at 11, but the kids don't care. Well, Billy, at 3 in the morning, and this got especially bad because it happened more often around finals, he would get out of bed. He would routinely walk in and out of the room a lot at like 3 in the morning when I'm trying to sleep. It's like, okay, it's your room too. If you gotta get something, but try and get all of the things you're gonna need at one time and then leave the room, and try not to come back until you're ready to sleep. You don't have to keep coming in and out, grab my shoes, go out. Oh, grab my, wallet, go out. Grab everything at once, dude, seriously. Well, Billy, he had the how they have the tennis balls that are blue, that are like plastic, they're better for bouncing? Well, Billy bought a can of these, and what he would do at night, at like 3 in the morning, he would go outside, not outside the school, outside of my dorm room door, and bounce the ball against the wall. So, at 3 in the morning when I'm trying to sleep, I continue to hear a ball bouncing against a wall. And it's like, what kind of an inconsiderate jerk does that? Seriously. But anyway, it all culminated the night before finals. What happened was, I had a break before my finals. I had about 4 days, plus a weekend. I had 6 days total that I went home and studied for finals. After having the room for 6 days to himself, when I got back to the room, there was more kids in that room than I've ever seen. There was about 8 kids in that room. 2 of them were sitting on my bed after the millionth time I told them not to. Garbage was all around the room. It was late at night. This was the night before a final. And again, he's had the room to himself for 6 days. I walk in, and I'm just like, seriously? I yell at the kids to get off my bed, and then I leave because I'm really pissed off. I call my dad. I'm like, what do I do? I'm ready to go in there and like smack this kid in the face. I'm not a violent person. I wouldn't actually do that. But I was really pissed off. I was ready to scream. So what my dad told me to do, he told me to go in there, ignore the rest of the kids around, because this is a problem, because he constantly had friends around him, because he's a lax guy, which is fine if you want to have a friend who's this totally chill, like, oh dude, do whatever you want guy, but when you have to have a roommate like that, that's the party guy that always has to have people, he's never in the room by himself, always has to have people in the room, it's a nightmare, and no one understood why I hated my roommate. You know, everyone was like, "What's wrong with you?" Everyone loves Billy. And shoot, I had a point. And then the other thing is because everyone was on his side, so it really felt like it was me against Billy and 20 other people. It wasn't just me against Billy in my room. It was me against Billy and my ex-friends who now hated my guts because I ignored them, and didn't understand my problem, because none of them feel the same way I do about privacy and quiet and peace, and none of them are as light sleepers as I am. So what he told me to do is he told me to go in there and just talk to Billy. Go right up to him and say, "I have a final tomorrow morning. The video game's going off. These kids are out of the room." So I do that. I go in there, I talk to him. And you know what he says? He's like, yeah, I guess you guys have to get out now. Oh, dude, I totally understand. I've had the room for 6 days to myself, and you have a final at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. I can totally accommodate you. No. He's blaming me. He's basically going to them and being like, "Hey, guys, don't blame me. This kid wants you out of the room." And you know what? They all leave the room. He stays in the room and continues playing the game by himself. What a horrible kid. What a horrible person. And because none of it was actually breaking any of the rules of the school, I couldn't, report him or, there's nothing I could report him for. He was just an inconsiderate person, There's nothing against having a million kids in the room, so. After that, that was the first semester, so I switched. I definitely, I switched out of the room. Because that was not a happy situation. And as you guys know, I couldn't record any videos like that because they were constantly in my room. And one of the major problems of University X was the fact that there's nowhere to be at a certain hour. Library closes at about 11. All the cafeteria closes at about 11. Everything shuts down at 11. The lounges, which are on the same floor as your dorm, they're not somewhere else, so even if I were to sit in the lounge, I wouldn't be away from this noise and these kids and, kids trying to sleep. I'd be right there. The union room or whatever, the student union, that closes at 11. There is nowhere I can be except my room, or out on the streets of New York City, past 11 o'clock at night. There's nowhere I can bring my laptop and just kind of chill by myself. So my room was my only place that I could record or sit and be by myself, or try to get peace and quiet, or just sit down even, and be not on the street of New York City. And that was gone because it was his room. He took it over. He walked all over me, intentionally or not. So that was Billy. Now, my next roommate, basically, I get there. And again, I don't have any choice in picking it. It's just, I put my name back in the pool. They're like, "Okay, we'll pair you up with whoever's open, whoever's available the soonest." So, a few weeks into the second semester, I go, and I find out where my room is, and I find out that I'm going to move the next day. So, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll go down and I'll knock on the door, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm going to be your new roommate." Give him a heads up that I'm going to be moving in. Go down there, knock on the door, no answer. And there's a sign on the door that's like, "If you're here to fix the wall, leave door unlocked." And I'm like, this isn't a good sign. He likes to leave the door unlocked. Whatever. And not only does he like to leave the door unlocked, but he advertises the fact that he leaves his door unlocked. Right? So I'm like, okay, maybe he's in the lounge. So I go to the lounge and I'm like, no, screw it. I'm going to use his actual name. This kid doesn't deserve it. This kid is scum. So I'm like, "Hi, does anyone know Robert?" Because the name on the door was Robert. "Are any of you Robert? Does anyone know Robert?" And they all look at me, and then the one kid's like, oh, that's me. And he's like, "Sorry, I go by Bobby." And he gets up, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, I'm going to be your new roommate." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Cool." And he's like, "Okay." And it's just like, all right, so I leave, When I go to move in, this kid has stuff all over, both sides of the room. I have to move some of his stuff back on his side of the room because he took over the entire room, even knowing that I was going to move in the next day. So right off the bat, he was a slob. And also, there was a hole in the wall right by his bed, like a fist-sized hole. Interesting, to say the least. And I know for a fact that the kid his last roommate moved out of his room because he didn't like Bobby. Not because he moved out of the school or anything. He specifically had a problem with this kid. So already, it wasn't seeming... didn't seem like a good situation. So the first night I'm there, I'm like, oh, hi, I'm AJ, I'm a film major. What's your major? He's like, oh, I'm a theater arts major. And, we're not, like, looking at each other when we have this conversation. He's busy, like, looking for something in his mess of a room. And I'm like, okay, cool, you like any musicals? What musical do you like? And I asked it because he's a theater major. You have to like musicals if you're going to be in theater, You might not be a musical theater person, but you still have to like something. He's like, oh, I don't really like any. And, like, I'm trying to start a conversation, I'm trying to start a dialogue, so it didn't get to the point with Billy where we weren't talking because there was so much intimidation and so much, you want to start a dialogue early because when there is a problem, you want to be able to sit down and talk about it as acquaintances instead of as someone who has a problem with someone else. I tried that, didn't work. Bobby didn't even want my cell phone number, which is something that Billy at least wanted. We at least got each other's cell numbers. The one thing that Billy did right was, and whenever he wanted the room by himself for winky face purposes, as he included in the text messages, I'm going to need the room for, I was like, okay, cool, just be done by this time, I get out of class then. Okay. So none of us walked in on each other doing anything sketchy, me and Billy, so that was alright. Bobby didn't do that. Bobby didn't, right off the bat, I knew this was bad news. This is bad news bears, guys. As the days went on, there would be piles upon piles of clothes that were left on the floor, right in the middle of the floor. Not on his side on the floor, just in the middle of the floor. And all over his room. But I don't care what he does to his side of the room, but I need a walking space. There's very limited space on the floor to walk. It shouldn't be completely taken up by your clothes. There's basically, the floor should separate into 3/3, and 1/3 is your third, 1/3 is mine. You can have stuff on your third, but he had stuff on his third, the middle third, and some of it spilled over into my third. But I put up with this crap. I put up with, the room being a mess and stuff like that, because Bobby had a boyfriend, and I don't even know that kid's name. I didn't want to know. Bobby's boyfriend was actually more friendly to me than Bobby was. But anyway, Bobby stayed over his boyfriend's place a lot. So for all the fact that he was a flake from the start, for the fact that, the room was a mess, I got the room alone a lot of... He was a social person, and an outside social person, not an inside play video games, with a million people. So I got the room to myself a lot of the time. So that's why I was like, all right, you know what, this kid sucks, but whatever. I get the room to myself. And a lot of nights, too, because he slept over. His boyfriend, so, I could stay up all night playing Pikmin, without headphones or anything. I had some fun time. That's why I didn't immediately move out. Because, and I mentioned this last time, he started selling Adderall right in front of my face. How stupid is this kid that he's doing illegal dealings right in front of me? He doesn't know who I am. I could tell on him. I did, and the school didn't care. But even still, if I had talked to someone who maybe actually did care, he would have gotten kicked out of that room. And there was no bones about it. There was nothing secretive about it. He was like, one kid was like, how much for 5 pills? And he's like, oh, $50. And this happened repeatedly, in the room. I don't get it. And also, he liked to make out with his boyfriend a lot when I was in the room. And ordinarily, again, it's just like what you do on your side of the room, whatever. But I could hear it. I could hear it a lot. And it's not even that he was gay. I don't want to be involved in anyone else's... I don't want to have to hear someone making out with the other person a lot. And this is the thing. For as much as he did sleep over there, anytime that he slept in my room, the boyfriend slept here in my room. So I had to hear that all night long. Irritating stuff. But again, I got the room a lot. Well, after a certain point, I did tell the RA, and the RA was like, oh, you should have a peer-to-peer conference with him. And I'm like, really? So your advice, after I told you that my roommate sells drugs, I should go to him and be like, hey man, listen, can you please sell drugs outside of my room? Please, thank you. Yeah, I just, I can't do that. Like, who talks, like, that's not right. He's doing something wrong. He should be punished. I shouldn't have to ask him politely not to do something illegal in my room. Right? So, there was all this, and in the second half of the semester, he started spending a lot more time in the room. And that's when it got to be really irritating. And because he was over the boyfriends half the time, he treated the room, when he didn't sleep here, he treated the room like a big dumping ground. He would just take stuff, throw it on the floor, and then leave. He didn't have to sleep there, he didn't have to look at it, he didn't have to walk on that floor. So, anyway, it gets to a point, when he's over a lot more, there get to be several key incidents that really just drive me insane. The biggest being, basically, when you have the situation like this with a roommate, where he basically, after that first day, he never spoke another word to me, and I never spoke another word to him. And you know what? That could be okay. I'm totally fine with not, pretending my roommate doesn't exist. I'm okay with that. I'd prefer that, But the thing about that situation is, if we're going to pretend each other doesn't exist, we're not going to be nice to we're not going to say hi to each other, we're not going to be nice to each other, then you can't call on me for favors. I didn't call on him for any favors, so he can't call on me for any favors, right? That's the give and take. If you're going to pretend I'm invisible, then I'm going to pretend you're invisible. And that doesn't entail you bothering me. So one night, it is... Wait, I'm trying to remember which incident happened. Okay, so, I'm getting fed up with this roommate situation. I'm getting fed up with, the mess. I'm getting fed up with him and the boyfriend being, sleeping here a lot. I'm getting fed up with some of the stuff. So, I'm not feeling well either. I got back on Monday, and because I could come back on Mondays in the second semester because I had a later Monday class. So I would come back, and I wasn't feeling good. So I got in my pajamas, and I laid, I was laying in my bed. I was all curled up. I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't looking well. I didn't want to see anyone. There was a knock at the door. Now, if anyone's knocking at the door, I didn't have any friends at the school. Spoiler alert. I mean, I lost them. But I didn't, glad I didn't, I didn't really want to associate with the people at the school, to be completely honest. So if anyone was knocking, it was either going to be someone for my roommate, or an RA, and if it was an RA, they had to say, open up, it's an RA. If it was an RA, I would open the door. If not, it's going to be someone asking for my roommate, and I'd have to tell them, I don't know where the roommate is. So there's no point in me opening up, right? So the knock at the door, I'm just like, alright, fine, I just won't say anything. The person walks in, and they're like, oh, sorry, dude, I think someone threw my mattress at the laundry room, because the laundry room was the floor below me. And I don't say a word. I'm like still curled up. I'm like, really? This kid just came in my room? He looks out the window. He's like, oh, it's not there, and he leaves. I assume he knew my roommate, but if not, this kid just knocked on the door and then came in. Again, he could have easily taken something if I wasn't there. So I'm like, okay, well, apparently I'm not gonna leave the door unlocked when I'm in my room anymore. I'm just gonna lock it. I don't want people walking in my room. If I don't answer, like, that's, how horrible is that? He didn't know I was in the room. There could be no one in the room, So I locked the door. At about midnight. Past midnight. And again, I wasn't feeling well, so I was, I was trying to sleep. I was in a downtime mode. There's another knock at the door. I ignore it. 5 minutes later, another knock at the door. I'm like, what? And then 5 minutes later, there's, like, a really furious knocking at the door. And I'm like, this has to be an RA or some kind of an emergency. So I get up, out of bed, go to the door. It's my roommate. He didn't have his key. He didn't bring his key with him. I had to get up and let him in. He doesn't say thank you. He doesn't say sorry for getting you up, waking you up. Because I wasn't sleeping, but I was in the sleepy mood. It takes me a ritual to get to sleep. So I have to get in the sleepy mood, and having to get up and open the door takes me out of that. No apologies, no thank you, nothing. Nothing. He walks in, grabs something, and leaves. Now, this key thing was an issue because when I first met him, the reason he said to leave the door open was because he had lost his key. And once he got his key 3 days later, he was like, "Oh, I have my key now, you can lock the door." He specifically said that to me. Because this is like one of the last conversations we had, because I asked him, I was like, "Oh yeah, can I lock the door? Because it's my right to lock the door." He's like, "I have a key, you can lock it now." So, he either lost his key or he didn't. I think he lost it, or he didn't have it on him. So all right. And as he's leaving, I call him a word. I call him a pretty bad word. And I get no response out of him. I say this word to his face. And it's because I'm tired, it's because I'm feeling sick and frustrated. It's not, I should have handled it better. But I say this expletive to his face, and I get no response out of him. This is a kid that, and he's on drugs. Not that, I didn't know about that night, but he's a kid who does, he pops a lot of Adderall, even though it's his prescription. And he does at least pot, and I'm sure some other things. One day I had to hear him complain about he only had 10 minutes to get high before class. The poor baby. But anyway, I cursed at him to his face. No response. This kid treats me like I don't exist. This kid is so off in his own little world. He's so far up his own butt that he doesn't even realize or care that he's pretty badly inconvenienced me. Billy, if this had happened, Billy would have said sorry. Because Billy did have at least some kind of human decency. Some level. But anyway, Bobby didn't. And wouldn't you know it, a week later, the same thing happens at 2:45 in the morning. There's a knock at the door. Then I ignore it. I go to sleep. But suddenly I wake up. For some strange reason, I wake up like 30 minutes later. And then 5 minutes later, there's another knock at the door. He's been knocking at my door repeatedly for every 15 minutes. Because he didn't know if I was in there or not. He just keeps knocking on the door. At 2-something in the morning. So I'm like, it's this kid. It's this jerk face. Forget it. I'm not letting him in. Unfortunately, my bladder disagreed with me. I had to pee. And the bathroom was outside. Which is a pain in the butt. So I was like, crud. So I carefully leave. I don't have a peephole or anything I can see. So I'm like, I leave, I go to the bathroom. I'm like, yes, I avoided letting him in. Because screw this kid, man. Screw him. He deserves to be locked out. It's not even like I'm letting him in to sleep. He could sleep over at the boyfriend's place. He did that night. So, he would come in, and put his, basically, it sounds like I'm complaining about, having to get up and that's not it. That's the fact that this kid valued grabbing. He grabbed something and left the first time. He just grabbed, I don't know what it was, but he left. And I didn't see him that night. He didn't sleep there. He put that value of his selfish butt, getting that object over waking me up or disturbing me. Because if you knock about 5 times and someone doesn't answer, they're either sleeping, doing something with their headphones on really focused, or not in the dang room. At that point, you are being very inconsiderate. He put the value of that object over my considering my feelings or what's going on in my life. But so anyway, I go to the bathroom. When I come back, unfortunately, he's there. Right? And he's like, "Oh, good." Again, no thank you, no can you let me in, nothing. So I try to walk in the room and I try to shut the door right in his face. Didn't work, unfortunately. He got in, grabbed something and left, and I didn't see him the rest of the night. So twice it happened. Those were pretty frustrating incidents. Another time, after the stuff started to pile up on the floor, one day I wake up. I get out of my bed. My bed is very high up. My bed was lifted up high so I could have stuff underneath it. I get out of bed, which takes a little bit of jumping. I jump straight onto a thumbtack sticking up. I am terrified of needles. This was a very bad experience for me. Luckily for him, he wasn't in the room. If he was in the room, he would have heard. He would have heard the wrath of AJ. Because there was a thumbtack. My foot bled. Because that kid, I don't know which, he either purposely left the thumbtack sticking up by my bed, and the only reason I say that is because I have thumbtacks all over my basement, and they routinely fall, and whenever they fall on their side. which hurts to step on, but it doesn't stick. The pinpoint doesn't stick up because of, the side is heavier. There's more surface area on the side. Physically, it should fall that way. So he either purposely put it there, which I kind of don't want to believe, because he was in his own world. He wasn't intent on like harming me or anything. He was just not gonna do anything. He was just gonna do whatever he felt like doing. He was gonna be inconsiderate to me and not care. That's what it was. It wasn't a malice towards me. It was that he's doing whatever he wants. This is his own room. This is his own life. No one's gonna tell him that he can't do whatever he feels like doing. Or there's a thumbtack on the floor because the floor is covered in crap, right? The floor is covered in clothes and other junk. By the way, those mice that I was talking about earlier, they make nests out of clothes. You're not supposed to have huge piles of clothes in the middle of your floor. And I know, because I didn't bring a thumbtack. I never brought any thumbtacks to school. I used the sticky tape to hang up stuff, because you're not supposed to put holes in the wall. He had a jar of thumbtacks on his desk, so it was definitely his. And I had to step on it. And again, this was the first thing that happened to me in the morning. The thing was sticking out of me. I had to pull the thing out of my foot. And again, I'm terrified of needles. So this was another fun incident that happened. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back here. After the second incident, after the second time I had to let him in the room inadvertently. I was really fed up, So, that night, okay, this is coming back to me. Sometimes the first and second night that happened blur together, but that night, what happened was, he did go back to the room. What happened was, after he came in the room, he left again, and then he came back in and left. And I was talking to my dad on the phone, because I was really pissed off. I had it with these kids at this school. So I was talking to him, and I think my roommate heard me talking a little bit about how much I was fed up with situations. So what I do, I'm like, Dad, can you please come get me? It's luckily because of the time of night it was, he was able to get in and out of the city really fast, and he's a good dad. He would do that for me. So I called him up, and he's like, yeah, tonight sleep at home. You've got like 3 weeks left of school, 3 or 4 weeks left of school. Maybe just commute the rest of the time. Go back and forth. It'd be a pain in the butt, but at least I wouldn't have to deal with this crap. So I take my laptop, I take a few things, and I go out in the lounge away from this kid. Because I'm like, alright, my dad will be here soon. So I'm out in the lounge for like 30 minutes. Not very long. And I realize I don't have my wallet. And that's something that I need. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go in, I'll grab my wallet. When my dad says he's here, I'll go in, grab my wallet, and then I'll go downstairs and leave. I go back in my room. My roommate is having sex. And there wasn't a note on the door, there wasn't a sock on the door, there was no... I was out of the room for less than 40 minutes. It wasn't like I was gone for the weekend. There was nothing to warn me. There was no text about it. I had to walk in on that. And I want to... it genuinely disgusted me. Because I didn't see anything, thank God. I could tell, out of the corner of my eye, I could tell there was some rumbling going on in the bed. But what really killed me was the fact that I walked in and there was a stench, like the worst smell you've ever smelled. This was like the smell of raw sewage, the smell of something related to the butt. Just put it that way. And I've had some gay friends, and I talk to them, and according to them, it shouldn't smell like that. There was something very unhygienic about whatever it was they were doing. They could have been defecating on each other for what it smelled like. So I walk in the room, I grab my wallet, and I leave. And I don't say any, I'm so tempted. I didn't want to look at him is the thing. I didn't want to even glance in that direction, but I was so tempted to look at him and be like, you are a bad person. You are a miserable, worthless human being. But, so I get the wallet and I walk out, and as I'm leaving, one of them, I don't know if it's my roommate or his boyfriend, one of them starts laughing. Like, really? Really? You think this is funny? You think I wanted to see this crap? You know? I didn't, and that's the thing, it's because it's who I am. It could have been, it could have been a heavy makeout session, between a guy and a girl, or two girls, or what, like, either way, it's just awkward. I find that awkward. I'm not like a prude or anything, but it's just kind of like, I want that to be your life. You deal with that, you get a room, basically. Ugh, that smell stays with me. And it's funny, please laugh, it is funny. But at the same time, I'm a little bit traumatized. I'm not gonna lie. And I'm being completely honest with you guys. That was probably one of the worst and most awkward experiences of my entire life. But you know what? It works out because he's a scatterbrained, irresponsible jackbutt that he's gonna get what he deserves in life. Here's some good news. He repeatedly fell asleep with his laptop, his $2,000 MacBook Pro, probably more expensive than that even. He fell asleep with it, and he's actually dropped it. It's actually fallen off of his bed 3 times. And last time I heard him like, oh, it's cracked. I think there's something wrong. And as he's giggling, and then later, like the next day, I see him. There's a box for a new MacBook. Irresponsible jerk had to pay another thousands of dollars to get a new MacBook. Loser. That kid's a loser. So here we're getting to the end of it here. After that, I'm like, all right, I'm commuting. I do not want to walk into this room ever again. Ever again. So, and it's another thing where it's like, if you want to, you want to have private time in the room, that's totally fine. But, I expected that they were doing something at some point. That's fine. If they're it's not that they were doing it in the room. It's that I don't want to see that. I don't want to know when that's going on. Same thing with Billy. He warned me. He was like, okay, can I have the room between this time and this? And I'm like, sure, go ahead. But, I just know I'll be back within the hour, so be done. That's how it works with roommates. It's just, So, I'm commuting, and, the next day, a few days later, I'm around the school, and, my RA, she's like, she sees that I'm really frustrated, and she's like, what's going on? And I'm honest with her. Again, I tell her everything that's gone on. And she's like, I know a kid on the 6th floor who doesn't have a roommate, and, Bobby, I know. I've had some problems with Bobby, and he's a very disrespectful guy. He's very, he doesn't get it. Talking to him's not going to help. I'm like, well, why'd you suggest I talk with him earlier? Whatever. But, she's like, I will try to get you in with this new kid. And the next day I got an email that I was in, and so I moved. But the night later that day, I had to go back into my room to get my textbooks, and as I was doing that, my RA was yelling at my roommate. She was like, you're a disrespectful kid, you do this wrong, you're this and that, and of course my roommate was just like, oh, he's not going to face the consequences. He's not going to be like, you're right, I was inconsiderate. He's like, you're not being fair to me, like, ugh, I'm living my own life, I don't have to be like, just scumbag Bobby. So, after that, I move in with this new kid, and I was only there for 2 weeks. There was some slight issues, like the fact that he would mumble to himself a lot, which is really weird that he did it around me, and it came off as a little bit creepy. And the fact that he had his alarm set really early, and he set his alarm to the static. Like he had a clock radio alarm, and no station would come in, so it would just be blasting static to wake me up at 8:30 when I had a 4:30 p.m. class. But whatever, minor grievances. And again, I was only there for 2 more weeks, so I was like, you know what, whatever problems I have, just sit through it for the next 2 weeks. So that's roommates. And that's, that's a lot of where my stress came from, because I'm an introvert, so I need a lot of downtime by myself in my room. And even if my roommate's there, but quiet, has his headphones on doing something, that's fine. But as a matter, if there's a bunch of kids in the room talking, I can't focus. If there's, like knocking on the door, forcing me to let him in like a little dog, that's not cool either, So, yeah. And again, because of this, I wasn't able to make videos. I had to wait till the videos when I went home. But that's the long and short of the roommate thing. That was definitely, be careful with roommates, guys. My advice, keep a dialogue going from the beginning. If there's a problem, try to be friendly, but try to be firm. The way I'm going to deal with problems like this in the future, don't go in and be like, cursing them out and being like, you need to do this, this, and this. Be like, listen, I have 8 o'clock, I have an 8 o'clock class. Get out of, these kids need to be out of the room by this time. It's fair. Please do that, So yeah, handle it like that. And if there's a problem, try to get moved early, because the law, it takes a long time for some schools to move you to, the transfer process, the transfer room process. So try to, put a thing in early. But yeah, and then of course, the second year, try to buddy up with someone. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next part.